There are some big changes coming to Umbral Shards in New World, and I have to say I think this is actually one of the bad changes that I've seen from Brimstone Sands. Everything else is pretty damn great and I like it, but this change I'm a little bit unsure about. Now before we talk about it, I just want to thank my YouTube members. Thank you very much to you guys, I do really appreciate it, and if you do want to support the channel, that truly is the best way to do so. So let's jump in and have a look at some data and I'll explain why I think it's a bad choice. Now this video is inspired by a Reddit post by Zizega. Basically we had seen the amount of Umbral Shards changing when you are upgrading your gear, but the missing part of the puzzle was how many Umbral Shards you actually get from mutations. And this post has all the information that I need to now make this video. So thank you, big shout out to them. Now I have shown off this graph before, but basically it's just the number of Umbral Shards you are required to use to get an item from one level to the next, obviously plotted from 590 to 625. The blue one is the old one, as in that is what it is currently like on the live servers, and the blue one is what it's like on the PTR. Now you might not believe this, but weirdly if you add up the totals here, you end up with a very similar number. So to go from 590 to 625 in theory is very similar. It's just the rate at which you do it changes depending on the level, and the curve has changed. So in the old one here on the blue line, there was a bit of a cut off at 600. Now the reason they did that was because they basically didn't want you to go from a like purple item to a legendary very easily. Now that at the time actually did cause some issues with casuals, because casuals had like 590 purple gear and the elites had like 600 legendary. So when we had the mutations, the people who were already ahead had a bit of an advantage because the people who were behind had to get over this little cliff. And anyway, you can see how it drastically ramps up towards the end. New World, AGS have decided, let's even out that curve. And you might think reasonably that looks fine, and it sort of does look fine on the surface, but it has a bit of a problem. Now, if you are a sort of casual player, or maybe you're behind or whatever, it now takes a lot more Umbral Shards to get to about 620. That's the cutoff point, right? You need more Umbral Shards to get to 620 than you did in the old system, but you need less Umbral Shards to get from 620 to 625, and that's the big change. Yes, it's a little easier at the start because there is no cliff when it comes to getting gear score 600, but up until 620 it's actually harder to get higher gear score now. But then from 620 to 625 it's actually easier. So the advice is, if you're currently on live, level up till about 620, and then if you can wait, you'll save Umbral Shards like that. But the reason this is bad is because all the people who are just starting mutations now have to spend longer to level up their gear score. It's actually harder now to get to 620, and a lot of people on the live servers are not running the low level expeditions. The majority of people are trying to do the highest that they can do, and we've had mutations for now for like 9 months, so a lot of people are doing the high end ones. However, to counteract this, AGS in this patch are also changing the rate at which you get Umbral Shards. A couple of things that I'm not going to touch on here. You actually do get Umbral Shards from some of the quests in Brimstone, so that'll make up some of the difference. But it looks like gypsum orbs and the chests there are pretty much exactly the same. There's no change. There doesn't appear to be a change from Outpost Rush either. But there is a change to the Expedition Mutator levels, so let's jump into that now. So this chart might be a little bit awkward to read because I was trying to do the colours as like bronze, silver and gold, but it just wouldn't look very nice. So let me explain it. Yes, I'm explaining a graph. So much fun, I appreciate that. Basically, the dotted lines are the old ones, so the ones that are currently live but will be getting phased out when we actually get this patch. And effectively the bronze one is red, silver is blue, and green is gold. Sorry, I know the colours might be a little bit weird, but the key thing here is the actual endpoints are staying the same. So an M10 run is not changing at all. All the other runs are getting slightly changed, and you can sort of see they all follow the same pattern. So all the old ones, for example, you didn't get very many shards up until M5, and then randomly it would jump up, and it was sort of then like linear growth up until about an M8. And then from an M8 to an M10, it would drastically shoot up. That curve is being leveled off when it comes to the new Expedition Mutators. We start at a higher amount, just flat base, so instead of it being like 50 or 40, like really pathetic amounts on live for an M1, you know, get a couple of 100. That's a good change, puts it in line with all the other type of content, like, yeah, they needed to have done that sooner. And you can sort of see that the curves are more linear. That doesn't make any sense, but they're almost straighter curves, if that makes any kind of sense. And the numbers are just higher. So basically, you're just going to get more Umbral Shards by running the Expedition Mutators at lower levels. A bronze M8, for example, is actually more Umbral Shards than a gold M8, so pretty good. Now this curve I actually have no problems with. I sort of feel like this is how it should have been at launch, and I can see the point of doing this. It's to encourage people to run the lower level mutations. They also have improved the gear that drops in those lower level mutations to try and not like limit it to just the M10s and the M9s and stuff like that. So on the surface, this chart is a good thing. I almost think that the other chart is almost a good thing anything. However, it just causes this issue where you're trying to get players to play these low level mutations and they're just not going to. It doesn't happen on live, and it's probably not enough changes to see it happening on the new version when it comes out. But if you take just this change, I think it's positive. If you include this, then I think it's a little bit negative, because as I said, and I'm going to probably repeat a few times in this video, just people aren't going to run the low levels. It's great getting people to 600, I think that's good, but yeah, that cliff there I think was very annoying and not really warranted. But yeah, this, like, it takes longer to get to 620. It sounds good if people are doing your progression, but when you have people who aren't doing your progression, like we have an endgame on the live servers right now, that's just a little awkward. I think for fresh, it'll make a lot more sense, but if you're a latecomer, it's sort of pulling the ladder up after the fact. What I wish they would have done is simply to even out this curve. They could have had it so that the red line, instead of going up and then curving back, could have simply have curved up, but to a lesser extent. It could have started higher and just curved a little bit more, but not gone so high at the top end. Be a little bit more subtle with the change rather than as drastic as what we've got here. There's a whole argument of whether or not it'll take more dungeon runs and stuff like that. I don't really care about that. It's more about, from my opinion, how many people are going to be doing these low level mutations. As I said, for fresh, I actually think that looks like a lot better of a system. There'll be more people spread out doing most of the mutations. I think for fresh it'll make sense. It might even make sense if we ever get like a proper expansion and we go to like level 70 or something like that, and everybody has to redo mutations, because we'll have to go through the progression again. You know, maybe they stop giving Umbral Shards at mutations, maybe they give Umbral Shards, and at that point they could have learned the lesson. But yeah, I just don't like this, how it's going to affect players who are basically like level 60 now, but who aren't gear score 625. If you're one of those people who are trying to get your gear score up from like 600 to 625, it's going to feel really bad unless you run mutations. Obviously, the answer to the situation is to just run mutations, but it basically makes everything else feel bad because nobody's actually going to run the mutations. It's fine if you can run the mutations, of course, but if there's nobody running them, well then you're stuck with gypsum orbs, you're stuck with Outpost Rush, and the amount of Umbral Shards isn't changing. Yes, you'll get more from quests, but is that really going to be enough? I don't know. I don't think it's the end of the world, by the way. I don't think it's a drastic problem. I think conceptually they've got some like good ideas there, and I think it's important right now to know if you are on the live server and you don't want to be spending all your Umbral Shards, go to 620 with whatever gear you want and then wait. And in a way, I do hope that this promotes the lower level expedition mutators to actually be run. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there'll be loads more people running them, and then this whole curve issue won't be an issue. Maybe that would be even less of an issue if you had cross-realm, because you can then probably always find a group, or your M2 Genesis or whatever, right? So not a big issue. I've probably gone on about that way too long, but yeah, it's a big change. It's important to know it affects the end game. Big shout out to my YouTube members. Again, if you really want to support the channel, that truly is the best way to do so. Have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.